Good evening and welcome back to After the Buzzer. I'm Couper Moorhead, Heat Insider, and in this episode we're going to be talking about the Miami Heat's 121-111 victory over the Toronto Raptors. Wasn't always a pretty game. Started out a little ugly. The Heat were fighting an uphill battle until the third quarter because they took a little time to hit some shots, which we'll talk about later. But, give the Raptors credit. That's a young team that plays hard. Sometimes they were a little bit disorganized, discombobulated on the offensive end, coughed up some turnovers that helped Miami out. Miami makes a run in the second half. Toronto takes that punch on the chin, fights back, takes a lead again very briefly. Miami takes the lead for the rest of the game, towards the end of the third quarter and takes it home from there. Could have been a clutch game. Toronto had 3 or 4 possessions where one shot goes in, all of a sudden we're at the threshold, under 5 minutes, within 5 points, and it's a clutch game again. So this was right there, even though Miami was still kind of in control once I took the lead, in the third quarter. So we're going to talk about right now, first, the threes that Miami hit tonight. First, the ones they didn't hit, and then the ones they did hit. And after that, we're going to talk about a defensive change of sorts that Miami made in the second half and how it kind of affected, Toronto's offense to Toronto's benefit in some ways early on, and then how the tables turned the second half. A little bit of a defensive change that was interesting for down the road. So the threes, Miami started frigid. They were ice cold. They were in the tundra. 2 of 17 from 3 in the first quarter. Most of the looks pretty good. Second Spectrum's tracking data, the data that comes from the cameras up in the rafters of the arena, didn't necessarily agree. The database there, the numbers, shot quality metric, which I'll use pretty often, but the shot quality metric was down a little bit. That's okay. I still thought the looks were pretty good. They were in the wheelhouse. Maybe Toronto contested a few of them, but very makeable. Definitely not threes you tend to shoot 2 of 17 on. But after that, Miami finished the last 3 quarters 19 of 37 from 3. That's over 50%. They finished 21 of 54, 39% overall. Put that into context, Miami only hit 21 threes one time last year, once. So they just met their season high from last year in a game where they started 2 of 17 from 3 from. That's pretty remarkable. 10 years ago, a team starts 2 of 17 from 3 in the first quarter, and I can still hear the fans. I can still read the tweets, see them in my memory. Why are you still taking threes if you're not making them? And my response 10 years ago, and this was a different league, this is early Golden State Warriors days, I would always say your past misses do not inform the potential for your future makes. Just because you've missed a few, that doesn't mean you're going to miss them if you keep taking them. Maybe if you keep taking really bad looks and you start forcing it, or if you're injured, or if there's a problem with the ball, something, some outlier situation. But given the same looks over time, you are going to start making them. Doesn't always happen like this, where you catch fire as a team over 50% through 3 quarters. But generally speaking, if you keep taking the good looks, the shots are going to fall. Water finds its level. Water most definitely found its level overall tonight because Miami finished, in their wheelhouse 39%. But, I just mentioned 10 years ago would have been different, would have been a different equation. Well, Terry Rozier entered the league 10 years ago, and I asked him, Terry, if a team started 2 of 17 from 3 10 years ago, would they have still gotten up 54 threes? What do you say, Terry?
Probably not. But you know how much the game has changed. So, that's been our goal for every game, try to get up 53s, and that's what we're going to rock with.
Exactly. It wasn't going to happen. But tonight, they got up 54 threes, their first time this season getting up over 50 threes, which Terry also mentioned is a number Eric Spoelstra kind of wants them to get to. Think about getting to 50 threes. You're not going to do it every single night, but it's a nice goal to have. You still want to have a balanced offense inside out. Toronto was doing a good job tonight of taking the inside stuff away, particularly in the half court. A lot of Miami's paint points came in transition off their 10 steals, which was helpful. But the threes were there. You got to take the looks that are there for you. And Miami has developed, a system with a roster of players that can scale up their three-point volume when necessary. Toronto, for example, tonight, as we're talking about in a second, their interior looks dried up. And even though Toronto had a good shooting night, 38% from 3, they only took 29 threes. because they didn't necessarily have the personnel that could scale up the volume on the three-point attempt. So where Toronto's offense stalled out when the interior wasn't necessarily available to them, Miami had the nice mix, and they got up their 54 threes. It turned the game around. Not a lot of teams are – barely anyone really is going to be able to withstand the barrage of threes that Miami put up in the second half, including a nice stretch from Jaime Jaquez Jr. hitting in some spot-up threes, and from Terry Rozier, again off the bench. Terry mentioned after the game the spot-up shots don't necessarily come naturally to him. You'll see him sometimes catch in a catch-and-shoot situation and then still take a dribble before he puts a shot up. Well, he talked about it a little bit and said he's working on it. That's natural for him to put the ball on the deck. He had some spot-up threes tonight. Really nice to see him kind of gradually get into that role. Again, we'll see if he keeps coming off the bench, but a nice performance from him. Also saw a couple big Bam Adebayo threes. He's still taking them. He attempted 6 threes tonight. Again, the volume is still there. We'll see where the percentages end up. But across the board, really nice job sticking with the three ball, getting up the volume they wanted to, and it turned the game around in the second half. Now, that defensive wrinkle I mentioned. Okay, quick story time. Quick. 3 years ago, almost 4 seasons ago, 2021, 2022, when Miami was one of the best defenses in the league, they were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Their defense was almost entirely based off switching. Off-ball, on-ball, pick and rolls. It helped to have P.J. Tucker next to Bam there. P.J. was probably one of the best switch defenders of his generation, as is Bam. But back then, Bam was always switching out on the other team's best players in pick and rolls, taking them out of the play unless they wanted to challenge him one-on-one for some reason, which didn't usually go very well. And then the Heat behind Bam, behind the switch, would be able to tighten up the paint and still keep the ball from getting in the paint. Now, as time went on, PJ wasn't on the team anymore. The roster became a little less switchable. And gradually, Eric Spoelstra and Bam in tandem, they had conversations about this. They slowly started to go more to drop coverage for Bam, more of a base coverage, a more conservative coverage with the Heat's typical aggression built in, rather than switch and put the other 4 players on the floor at risk. Now, why is this important tonight? This season they're still playing drop coverage, but tonight Bam was switching more than he has all season. He switched 9 pick and rolls tonight, which doesn't seem like a lot, but the way these things are tracked, 9 is only specific pick and roll situations. There were off-ball situations where he switched, handoffs, and what have you. Anyways, 9 switch pick and rolls for Bam tonight was a season high. And that's on a night where he only defended 19 pick and rolls, which is the 3rd fewest. So he almost switched half of the pick and rolls he defended. That is a number that really doesn't happen at all anymore for the Heat. It's more like 2, 3, 4 seasons ago when they were a switch-heavy team, one of the most switch-heavy teams in the entire league. Now, what happens when he was switching is that you saw Toronto get some of those interior post seals. Scotty Barnes, when Bam was on him. R.J. Barrett, when Bam was on him. Jakob Poeltl, Bam's primary man, but Bam would switch off, and then Poeltl would end up with a mismatch. The Raptors were really thriving off getting those interior seals and getting finishes at the rim. Now, you can usually tell the indicator of Miami's defense, how the defense is functioning based on how many shots they're defending at the rim, allowing at the rim, and makes, because they want to keep the volume low. Well, in the first half, Toronto was 14 of 16 at the rim. Not great. That's why they had a 40-point second quarter. Miami was scoring great in the second, but they just couldn't keep up because Toronto kept getting those interior scores, a lot of them in switch situations. In the second half, those shots dried up because Miami's, defensive pressure, again, even within the same things they were doing, got better. They made the adjustment, the play better adjustment, just play better. Now, here's what Eric Spoelstra had to say about why they were switching tonight and what it looked like.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a weapon we have in our toolkit. It just depends, what, you're willing to negotiate. We still, there's no scheme that's going to take away, you have to take the challenge, you have to handle your business, whether you're out in the perimeter or in the paint. We know full well that this is a great offensive rebounding team too. So, that's a thing that Bam could do extremely well. And he and Jimmy and H, but we don't want to just always be in that scheme. So it just kind of depends.
So of a few more numbers here of Toronto's 28 attempts at the rim tonight. Everybody will generally see that. They'll see points in the paint. They'll assume it was Bam, but because Bam was switching, of the 28 attempts they had at the rim, Bam only defended 8 of those, and that includes as the closest defender. So that includes tip-in opportunities, times when he helps as an interior defender. It's not really Bam being attacked himself. It's everything coming and being funneled to Bam at the rim. Of Toronto's, Toronto had 7 post-up attempts tonight. Again, there were more, but these are logged only as post-ups. On those 7, they scored 14 points, 2 points per possession, basically. They were flawless on those. None of those were defended by Bam, again, because he was switched out, and Toronto was attacking away from the switch. They were getting Bam on the perimeter, putting one of their other interior guys, on a mismatch. So in the first half, Miami was paying the price, paying the cost of switching, so to speak. In the second half, Toronto kind of had to pay the price for taking advantage of it because they were trying to move the ball, take advantage of the switch. But when you're moving the ball, you need precision and timing, and Miami's aggression disrupted that precision. Then you started seeing turnovers. Toronto's offense got a little out of rhythm, out of sorts for Miami's, during Miami's 2 big runs. And that's really all it took. The 3-point shooting did the rest from there. Why does this matter tonight? Why are we talking about switching on a night where Miami hit all these threes and had a fairly, comfortable win down the stretch? Well, it matters down the road. You don't want to be only a drop team. You don't want to be only a switch team. You want to be able to do all these things. Blitzes, like we've talked about in the past. You have to be able to toggle between all these different coverages to beat the best teams in the league, especially in the playoffs. You cannot be a 1 or 2 look team. Just like Miami will toggle between man-to-man and zone defense, you want to know that sometimes you can go back to who you were a few years ago, switch, which is Bam Adebayo is one of the best switch defenders in the entire league. Can you do that for possessions, stretches, quarters? Can you do that coverage effectively and then switch out of it again, get to something else? Can you be a dynamic, multidimensional defense? Tonight, it was nice to see the Heat be able to get to that switching. We'll see how it plays out down the road against better opponents. But for now, we've seen a variety of different coverages over the past few weeks from Miami, and that is a good sign for their defense going forward. That's all for this episode of After the Buzzer. I'm Couper Moorhead. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Take care.